Welcome to History Curiosities channel. In this video, I'll be discussing some of the most curious events in history. From strange coincidences to unbelievable feats, these stories will leave you amazed. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. 35 horrible and chilling things about Jeffrey Dahmer. Part 1. True crime stories are attracting more and more audience interest. Many new series deal with the most talked about cases in history. In this way, they surprise new generations with the most terrifying details from the past. Jeffrey Dahmer was one of America's worst serial killers. So no surprises if you've been hearing his name more than usual lately. Dahmer is the focus of one of the newest series produced by Netflix. But the series really reflects the life and details of Dahmer's crimes. In this video we will tell you 35 real facts about this fearsome serial killer, his life, his heinous crimes, and the details you would have never imagined about this case. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up to date with our updates. Number 1. His erotic fascination with death began in childhood. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin. He was the eldest son of Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. The family was completed 6 years later when his brother was born. It was his family that first noticed Jeffrey Dahmer's strange fascination with death. His father Lionel has revealed that as a young boy his eldest son was already cutting up animals for examination. Once after finding some roadkill, Jeffrey cut them up to examine their insides. He did what most young males do when hormones take over. I think his neural connections made contact and somehow programmed him, his father recounted. Number 2. He had his own fan club at school. Dahmer always had a withdrawn and obsessive personality, but at school he was very popular. He was the classic class clown, the student who would play practical jokes and daring pranks. Among others, he used to fake seizures or convulsions to scare the teachers. His popularity was such that some of his classmates proudly claimed to be part of Dahmer's fan club. They urged him to play more pranks. Number 3. His dad taught him how to preserve bodies. Those who knew Dahmer since childhood knew of his strange behavior, for during his youth he had a cottage full of animal carcasses. Dahmer was only 4 years old when he began collecting animal bones. According to his father, he was interested in how to put the skeletons together. But many of those animals in the collection had been killed by the child himself. However, the biggest surprise is that this strange childhood hobby was the basis for his terrible adult crimes. An important part of his actions was made possible by the teachings of his father. Lionel Dahmer was a chemist, and in an attempt to find common ground with him, he taught him to preserve animal parts. Those lessons were later applied by Dahmer to preserve the body parts of his victims. Number 4. A childhood surgery may have disrupted his personality. While there is no single motive that explains Dahmer's heinous acts, some events during his childhood have been pointed to as possible triggers for his behavior. For example, when he was 4 years old, Dahmer underwent surgery for a double hernia in his scrotum. Despite his young age, the boy was obsessed with the idea that his genitals had been mutilated in the operation. Clinical psychologist Judith Becker, who testified at the Dahmer trial, said that the boy held this belief. Also that the child's behavior became more withdrawn and shy after the surgery. Number 5. He did not have a loving upbringing. Dahmer's childhood and youth were also marked by parental neglect. Not physically, as they both lived with him, but he did suffer emotional neglect. His mother suffered from depression and from the time of Dahmer's birth had trouble getting close to her son. Because she was on antidepressants, she couldn't breastfeed him. So they didn't have this bonding from early infancy either. That would carry over into the rest of his life, as his mother also suffered from extreme anxiety. His mother even attempted suicide. His father, for his part, did not meet Dahmer's emotional needs either. The situation at home was such that Dahmer's first teacher reported her concerns about the child's neglect at home. Number 6. His first victim was almost a fantasy for Dahmer. Dahmer's first victim was young Stephen Hicks. The young man was just 18 years old. The young man was going to a concert and was asking for a car in the middle of the road, and Dahmer offered to give him a ride. By then Dahmer was already attracted to men. He had relationships with boys very similar to Steve Hicks. However, he didn't really accept these desires yet. Interestingly, as Dahmer himself told authorities, his main desire involved meeting a stranger in the middle of the road. The problem was that Dahmer never wanted to be dumped. So when the young man stopped Dahmer's car in the middle of the road, he was simply fulfilling the main fantasy of the man who would become his killer. Number 7. Dahmer claimed he killed the first young man out of fear. Dahmer was only 18 years old when he committed this first murder. It had only been a few weeks since his high school graduation. In his official statement, he confessed that he killed the young man but claimed it was an accident. According to his version, following his fantasy, Dahmer invited the young man to share some time at his house, and so they did. The violence began when the young man asked Dahmer to take him to his destination, the concert he wanted to attend. Dahmer asked him to stay longer and the young man refused. The fight escalated quickly until Dahmer picked up a dumbbell and hit him in the head. But the young man did not die from the blow. As he writhed in pain, Dahmer acted like a serial killer. Panicked, afraid of being discovered, Dahmer took the body to his parents' empty house. His mother had been gone for weeks with her youngest son, and his father was staying in a hotel with a girlfriend. Dahmer hid the body, then returned to cut it into pieces. He put the bones in the oven to weaken them so he could grind them. The bone dust was spread all over his yard. Number 8. He worked in a chocolate factory. Knowing the trades of serial killers is always curious. No one imagines a serial killer having a normal life. It is particularly surprising in the case of Dahmer, who among other things worked at the Ambrosia Chocolate Company in 1985 when he was 25 years old. He worked there for 6 years until he was fired for missing work and missed shifts. Probably because of his other recurring activity, murders. Number 9. He was obsessed with Star Wars and Exorcist 3. For some little understandable reason, Dahmer prepared to kill by watching some specific movies. For example, he enjoyed the evilness of the Emperor character in the movie Return of the Jedi, one of the parts of the Star Wars saga. He actually went so far as to wear yellow contact lenses to look like the character. He also frequently watched the third part of The Exorcist, the movie that narrates the actions of a supernatural serial killer. Number 10. He was a combat medic in the army. Perhaps even more surprisingly, Dahmer did military service, and even served as an army medic. Just 6 weeks after murdering Stephen Hicks, Dahmer enrolled at Ohio State University. But he withdrew 3 months later for underachievement. In 1979, at the age of 19, his father encouraged him to enroll in the army. Here he was trained as a medical specialist. Number 11. He was accused of mistreating soldiers in the army. At least 2 soldiers reported Dahmer for drugging and raping them. Preston Davis, a military buddy of Dahmer's, once testified that Dahmer drank a lot of alcohol, and when drunk talked freely about his murders. but none of them believed him. In 1981, just 2 years after he entered the military, he was declared unfit to maintain military service and given an honorable discharge. Number 12. He enslaved one of his military buddies. Billy Caption was a young soldier only 17 years old. He was Dahmer's roommate during his military service. According to his allegations, Dahmer overpowered him within days of his arrival. He locked him up, abused, drugged and assaulted him frequently. Periods of abuse alternated with times when Dahmer would lie next to him, tell him he loved him and caress him. This situation went on for more than a year, to the point that his partner planned how to kill him. He did not dare to report it at the time. Years later, when he disclosed his allegations, he received a special army pension for having been tortured by a fellow soldier. Number 13. Dahmer was an alcoholic. The most decisive factor in Dahmer's expulsion from the army was his alcoholism, an addiction that started quite early. Dahmer was known to come to high school classes drunk. He even kept bottles of liquor in his locker. During his military service, he was admitted to an alcoholism recovery program but showed no results. As a result, he was discharged. Number 14. In total he had 17 victims. Dahmer was a prolific serial killer. He killed 17 men, all from vulnerable or unstable backgrounds. His victims were the type of people who would not have many mourners or would not be actively sought by the authorities, such as young runaways or drug dealers. Their ability to kill evolved rapidly. In just 2 years, their victim count rose from 4 to 17. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight when you depersonalize another person and see them as just an object. An object of pleasure and not a living, breathing human being. It seems to make it easier to do things you shouldn't do, Dahmer once said. Number 15. He didn't just kill. One of the most frightening aspects of Dahmer was that his attack did not end with death. After finishing off his victims, he would lure them in by offering money for a night of companionship. He would cut the body into pieces, and not always to hide it more easily. When his home was searched, the police found macabre souvenirs of his attacks. Preserved body parts. Park, a forensic psychiatrist and FBI consultant, explained that many serial killers keep souvenirs of their victims as trophies. These trophies are usually identification documents or parts of their clothing. But few are so motivated by their loneliness that they keep pieces of their victims' bodies. Number 16. His apartment stank. Dahmer's first murders occurred at his grandmother's house. She didn't know about his crimes but voted for him because of his erratic behavior and alcoholism. Dahmer then took off to an apartment in Milwaukee where he committed most of his crimes. Naturally, with a collection of body parts, the foul odor in his apartment was notorious. His neighbors never saw any strange behavior. They perceived him as a withdrawn young man and nothing more. But eventually they noticed the odor emanating from his residence. The police officers found hearts and skin parts from different areas of the body, including genitals. Some were in the freezer, as he also used to consume it. All aspects of the Dahmer case are frightening, but perhaps the worst of all is the furor this killer caused in much of the American public at the time. Many people declared themselves his fans. The case to some extent brought him more fame than justice or vindication for his victims. As time goes by, Dahmer's image remains increasingly frightening and creepy. But the fame remains intact. The new series has served to maintain the memory of his victims. Reflections on racism and the prejudices that his case must have left on the authorities. But the debate about the killer's fame over that of his victims remains. We hope you found this video useful. If you have anything to add, please share it with us in the comments section. Like this video and send the link to your family and your best friends, so they also know more about the horrible and creepy things Jeffrey Dahmer did. If you are new to our channel, don't forget to subscribe. We'll be back soon with more curiosities from history.